Tools used in this video, it's a good idea to do this, is a pair of diagonal cutters, a pair of wrench pliers or a crescent wrench, a open end wrench, 7/16 and 3/8 tape measure. I've got a 4-way hand wrench that has got 4 sizes, kind of like a pocket. Socket wrenches, some wire nuts, 1/4-inch nut driver magnetic, 5/16 nut driver magnetic, electrical lineman's type strippers, wire strippers, and crimpers with a cutter on the end, and then of course plenty of light, a flashlight. On this installation of a motor, your furnace is probably heating up with the blower shaft frozen. And then what happens is that without the blower running, the heat exchanger heats up too hot and trips the safety. There's usually 2 safeties. One is a resettable safety that clears after it cools off. Another is a safety that is one that has got a melting element in it that is permanently tripped. So if that one has tripped, your system will not come on, and you'll have to replace that. We're not going to do that. We're going to go on the assumption that you have the resettable one tripped, and that the only problem you have that you're working on is a frozen shaft on your motor. So let's get started. Alright, what we have here is a Carrier Weathermaker furnace. It has a problem that is quite common to all furnaces, forced air furnaces, and that is the blower motor seizes up over time, and it needs to be replaced. So after determining that blower motor was seized up, which is, we can determine that by, you get a complaint where it just runs for a short time and then it stops completely, it doesn't run anymore. So if you reach in with the power turned off, you turn your power off right here. If you reach in and you feel that blower squirrel cage in there, and you can't really see it here at this point, but if you feel that squirrel cage in there, you really can't see it. Maybe you can just barely see it there. And it's hard to turn. It has a friction on it. It's hard to move that blower. That's an indication that you got a problem with the bearings being out on that. So this one here, what we're going to do is we bought the new motor, which is available at the local industrial supply, local HVAC store. They have usually a universal motor that you can buy that has, well, it's got reversing leads on it, so you can put it in to applications where it goes either clockwise or counterclockwise. And then this has got 4-speed capability, so you got the brown wires are for the run capacitor, and then the blue, red, white, yellow, and black wires are for the power and speed selection. The motor comes without any bracket on it on this particular design, so you got to move the bracket So we're going to go ahead and change this motor. This is a condensing furnace, so it has a water drain. So I'm going to disconnect the water drain. And sometimes it's kind of difficult to get that water drain off the side, because even though I got the one end disconnected, I don't have the end here, and this is all glued together. So with one hand I'm not going to be able to do that. I'll have to come back and show you after I pause here. What I'm trying to do is get this pipe, so this pipe is out of the way, so I can get the blower out. See how that's got a long end on it that goes down into the drain tube, and the one that goes vertically is for the air conditioning. So anyway, I got the power switch turned off right here. Up on there is turned off. So now I'm going to take the control board out so that I can get the get to the blower. There's a couple of screws here that hold it on the right on this one, and there's one over here on the left. This one here is kind of hard to get to because, as you can see, it's right under the inducer blower bracket, but I was able to loosen it. So we'll take these 3 screws out. And then there's a edge card connector here that comes out. Just pull that out, get that out. And then there, out comes the control unit, which, if you're careful, you can manhandle around without disconnecting any wires, so you don't have to worry about disconnecting and making any major changes to the wiring errors when you're reassembling. Now we've got your wires that connect for your motor speed, which are right here on a multi-conductor plug connection. So you want to make note of that, and so that you know how to connect up the new motor to that. So what I've got there is there's multiple speeds there. Here's a little trick. Just use a bungee cord to hold this control box up out of the way, because we're going to get in for these 5/16 screws here, right in here. That one there. And then this one over here. I've got an extended length 5/16 nut driver with a magnetic tip on it, which is fairly uncommon these days. That makes it a lot easier. Then this water track thing needs to be unmounted from the fan housing. So that right there, also you can take and kind of hook it up out of the way. Being careful not to lose your parts. This ferrule for this water connection here, it's a ferrule and a nut, and we don't want to mess that up. Have to find out how that goes back in there. Okay, looking at the other side, it's tapered. It's tapered here like that, so clearly it has to go like that up here. So if you see that ferrule there is flush on the end. Okay, so now my goal here is to make sure that I can pull that blower out without it hitting these hoses. Okay, so that's going to be the next challenge. So let's see how that comes out of there. Should be able to pull that right out. It just comes right out. Okay. And it slides into a slot on each side. You see how this has got an edge here, an edge along here. There's an edge along here, an edge along here. Okay. These are the two tabs. This tab right here, and this tab right here, and that slides in. You can see there's a lip right here. There's a notch there, a little kind of a shelf where that slides right in over here. You can see that right in there. As you can see above, that's the heat exchanger. Being a condensing furnace, that's the condensing furnace type heat exchanger. So now that blower is out of there completely. You can see, so now let's take apart the fan. Okay, you can see that fan blade is there, and it's stiff. Okay, it's hard to turn. Some of these blowers do not have oilers on them. This is one of them. So basically, we got to just replace the motor. And the trouble is you can't get the fan off of the shaft after you take the motor out. You got to do it together, combined. This particular motor does not have any oiler around here. Some of these motors had a plug that was, at the same spot on the motor. So in this case, if this being the top over here, there'd be a plug, say right here. And then down there on the bottom, there'd be a plug down there. Okay. And then you would basically take the plug out and oil it. But of course, even if the motor does have an oil port, there's a good chance you won't be able to get any results because the bearing is probably already damaged beyond repair. If it's so bad that the motor stalls and trips the overload or trips the safety in the furnace, chances are your bearing is damaged anyway. so you really can't do anything about it other than replace the motor. You could get maybe a few more weeks or months out of it if you lubricated it, but there's if it's froze up, it's probably done. So we're taking out the 3/8 bolts, which in this, actually it's 7/16 bolts. These are 1/4 20 threads, 7/16 bolts that hold the motor in place. Okay, so now that motor is free moving. Okay, so now we have to free up the motor, the squirrel cage blade from the shaft. Okay, so you see that shaft has got a flat on it. Okay, so we got to make sure when we put this back together we get the flat correct on the motor, on the fan blower blade, and then we will, because you can rotate that. See, I've got it off center now. Okay, so turn this back over, turn it sideways, and we'll disconnect the P-clip here, which is a 1/4 inch head, also a magnetic nut driver long style, which once again are not very common these days. They're kind of hard to find. So now we're going to pull this motor. Can't do it one-handed. Okay. So there's the fan squirrel cage blade and the motor and the stiff motor shaft. Okay, now we've got one thing that's kind of not terribly obvious is you just leave this in here. Don't worry about it. You know, if you have to clean that squirrel cage blade, you can do that by removing this screw right here and this screw right here, and take this little piece, and then these two screws here. Take this little piece out, and you might have to take this out too, which has got a screw here, right there, and a screw right there. Then that blade, that fan, will come right out the top, and you can clean it. You can see it's not terribly dirty, so I'm not going to worry about it. Alright, so as you can see, the replacement motor doesn't have any mounting on it, ring or anything. The original has a clamp, belly band clamp, which in this case is not a hose clamp. It's just a bolt that pinches it. Okay, so that's got to be taken off. So of course, before you do that, you've got to take a measurement on your bracket so that the front of your motor right here is going to be in the same place as the new motor. Okay, so we're going to get a tape measure and do that. Okay, this you can basically take a measurement from where the motor hub sticks out to the bracket. So I'm measuring that right at 2.5 inches from the front, this part right here, that edge right there, to this edge right here. So I got 2.5 inches there on that. So now that I got that measurement, I'll take that belly band off. That's a 7/16 also. Now I'm looking at this nut, and it's a locking nut, which means it's got to have you've got to hold the nut and the bolt. If you can see here, there's a little dimple right there in the nut. See the dimple? That means that's a locking nut. So with 2 hands, I'll be back in a second. Okay, so now you can see that clamp is loosening up there. The distance between here and here, loosening up. So now, as you can see, this is beginning to move around. This is an interesting setup in that these clamps are actually loosely fitted. So you're going to have to, probably best thing to do here is take your motor and put it flat on the ground like that. Okay, when you go to tighten that band up, you've got to have these all at the same height. So lay it on the ground so they're all at the same height. And then of course at the same time you got to check this dimension that we measured. So I will move this band to the other motor, which requires me to loosen it even more. You can see where I've got the one pliers holding on to the bolt head, and then the nut is looser yet now. So here's the bad part: is if you get it all loose like that, it just falls apart. It just falls apart. So now you have a pile of stuff that you don't know how it goes back together. Got a bad motor and everything. So one thing you can do, of course, is take a YouTube video of your procedure and post your video on how you did when you do it. And at the same time, with that video in hand, you can play it back for yourself when you're assembling your new motor. Now there's one thing that is kind of interesting, that these universal substitutions oftentimes are different sizes. Okay, see that there? Alright, so the only thing that's really important is that you get the dimension from here to where your mount has to be, right here, where this is at. Get it correct. So since these are dimpled, the brackets are dimpled here, they're gonna want to hook into this band in that notch. Okay, so we're going to put the band exactly 2.5 inches down from where it needs to be from this dimension. So let's do that right now then. And you'll notice the new motor doesn't have any oiler either. So there's no up or down on this motor. Okay, so this band we'll just put over the motor like that. And then we will adjust our brackets so that our dimension is exactly 2.5 inches. Now here's something too. This universal motor comes with an extra mounting bolt length, so we don't need those. So we'll just cut those off. with a pair of Knipex dikes. Alright, and I'll stop and we'll have the bracket measurements and mounting done here off camera. So I've loosely fit the brackets on the motor like that. There's the one here, here, and here in 3 positions. Okay, so now I'm going to tighten this up here until it's more stable. Now, having this much tighter than it was, these brackets are tending to, they're wanting to stay in position, see? Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to set up my original measurement from here, like I did before, right there, out to 2.5 inches, and then tighten it up. Here's a stumbling point right here. This bracket here I don't have in the right place. It's caught right here. See right there? So I can't even move that. So I will have to loosen that band clamp over here in order to get this third one in. And then also it's pretty obvious now that this motor is taller. These brackets were going to not be in the same spot. That motor's going to stick out of the end here. Okay? So I won't be able to level it. I'll have to level it by measuring the and visually checking the position of these 3 brackets. Unlike the other one where the bottom of this sat right on the ground, see? Doesn't now. Here's an important thing. Always make a note of what your wiring diagram calls for before you cover it up. Because once you get it all together, you won't be able to read that nomenclature anymore. So check that out. Right now I'm in the process of positioning this dimension here at 2.5 inches here. Okay, depending on what kind of motor you get, the color code won't necessarily be the same. So you got to read the nomenclature on the motor on the new one and the motor on the old one before you put it together when you get the band off of there, because the band, chances are it's going to cover up. So here's what you want to do is make a column for the old on the left and a column for the new on the right. And then the function on the left column is neutral, high, medium low, low, and capacitor. And then under the O column you've got white, black, yellow, blue, red, and brown times 2. And then under the new column you've got white, black, blue, yellow, red, and brown times 2. So that you just take extra 5 minutes to get a Sharpie and write that down so that when you get this all mechanically put in, you don't have to worry about, oh gee, I didn't read the nameplate. You know, so you're okay. Now, having set that band so it's 2.5 inches from the front of the motor. Okay, see that? If you look right at it there, that's even there. That's at 2.5 inches right there. So now we can do the final tightening on this band, this belly band. As you can see, I have no luck at all. Well, now I have, but now the motor's turning, so I've got to go back to two-handed operation here. Now if you look, you can see that's tight, really tight. Okay, and then these actually do move just a little bit, but not much. They've got a rubber cushion mount, but as you can see there in the right position now. And if I take this motor and set it flat down, you can see they don't touch the ground, whereas they did on the other one. They touch the ground. See, it's not touching. So now we're ready to reassemble mechanically on this. So you've got the flat on the shaft that has to be match up with the square drive bolt on the fan blade. So we'll put that back together. So that goes in like that, and you just kind of have to roughly force it together, because this blade, this fan, does not come out that end. It's trapped in there, since I didn't take this out and I didn't take this out. Alright, so now I'm ready to put the quarter 20 bolts back in that hold the motor to the fan squirrel cage. Okay, so there's one right here, and I'll mount that in after turning it so that the fan is down. Makes it a little bit easier. You can line it up. Make sure you don't lose any of your hardware or misplace it, because you've got a bushing and a bolt and a washer. Don't get yourself out of whack by not following the basics, keeping track of your hardware. Now, if you got these brackets a little bit off when you were putting them on the motor, they don't line up, then you may have to reverse this process to correct that problem. Or you can stick 2 wrenches down in here and loosen that, which is going to be difficult because there's very little available space here. But fortunately I got it right the first time. Now you'll notice I didn't really get the wires in the best place. Here's where they want to hook them. I got them over here. Doesn't matter that much. They're really long. They could actually connect up. They're designed to connect all the way up to the control board if necessary. That's what it's set up for. So now that's mounted in there. Now I'll turn it over on its side, and you'll see that this fan is actually in there pretty nice, but it's way too far to the left. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll just reach in there and slide it, and on one that's not too nasty and dirty and scummy, it moves real nice and easy. One thing you might have noticed, I haven't disconnected the old motor from anything. I don't want to mess with the wiring right now. I'll leave it until I get to that point. So now, what will happen is if I turn this on its back, that fan's going to move. So let me rotate myself around here, and we will, without moving the fan sideways, we'll dial that flat in so it's in the right spot. Now, these flats, they will not be right on the money every time, so you might have to wiggle things a little bit to make sure you're getting it on the flat. You don't want to flat tighten it so it's not on the flat completely and you think it's tight. So I'm going to check that. See, what I've done here is I have a wrench to hold the shaft so I can wiggle the shaft separately from the fan. So I've done that already, and I know that my fan shaft is in the right position. So now I'll take my wrench and I will tighten that securely. And then just simply recheck my fan, make sure the gap here and here is the same, and of course that it's spinning and that it looks straight. You can see the motor in there and everything. Now, there's universal motors out there. You've got those reversing wires. Your squirrel cage fans always rotate in the direction like this. You've got the discharge right here. This is just what we call the snail. So the air always goes from the small part of the snail to the big part of the snail and out. So that means this one is going to go clockwise from this direction. So when we go to check that direction, after we get it all installed and everything, we will want to make sure that fan's going that direction. Get a better view of that right here. Alright. One of the funny things is if you get it backwards, it'll still work, but it won't work as designed. So don't get yourself in an uproar if you make the mistake and you don't check it, because it will still work if you have it going the wrong way. But don't do that. Just get it right the first time. Okay. See, we got some high quality wire nuts. We got a proper electrical pliers. We got a 1/4 inch nut driver. We'll take the capacitor off. And don't skimp on the capacitor. Replace the stupid capacitor. Okay, you're watching this video. There's a good chance you haven't done any work on this project yet, which means you don't have any of the parts. Alright? So, get the capacitor. If your dealer doesn't sell you the capacitor, doesn't mention it to you, then be sure you ask about it. This is a rat's nest of wires. Now, in this design, there's 2 brown wires of the same color for the capacitor, and it doesn't matter how you connect it. Just connect one terminal to each of the 2 terminals on the capacitor, like that. Okay, and the capacitor has got a bunch of terminals, but there's one for each wire. Okay, so mount that right on your back in the same place as the other one was. And if you're lucky, like I appear to be, although the capacitor is the slightly different size, it still mounts in the same place. If you don't have the same size, then make some kind of modification in the bracket so that the capacitor can be mounted properly. Don't throw it in there and not mount it. Some guys will just throw it in there and not mount it. Hook your ground up from your motor accordingly. In this case, the ground came on the motor. Ground wire came on the motor. And sorry if I'm not videoing very good here. Kind of tough to do one-handed. So you can see I've got my screw and my ground wire. Now there's one thing that kind of looks interesting is I might have been too short on that ground wire. If I had gone just a little more, I would have been too far away. So there's something to be said for the next time, or for all you YouTubers. Make sure you get your wires closer to where they need to be. Okay. Every one of these will be a little bit different, but as you can see, this green yellow is your ground. The brown is dedicated to the capacitor. There is no polarity on that. Then you've got these wires that are called out on our diagram. So let's see, where's our diagram? Or not diagram, but our paper notes. So now we take our notes, and in order to maintain the existing configuration on this unit, we're going to cut these wires right here, and we'll use wire nuts to splice our motor wires in. So following our diagram, that's what we'll do. Properly prepared wires are stripped. The ends of the wires are the same length. Line them up the same length. Okay? And then put your wire nut on. Do not pre-twist the wires. Push the wires into the wire nut as far as they'll go, and then tighten the wire nut. Okay? Don't mash the stranded wires over and fold them over. Gently screw the wire nut onto the wires. Okay? And then tighten. Alright? And then when you got it on there, check to see that the wires do not pull out. This is a common problem with inexperienced users of wire nuts. You can get yourself into a situation where they'll come loose. Alright? Doing one color at a time. Do all the matching colors first. I did the black, the white, the red. Now I'm doing the blue and yellow, which the diagram shows are interchanged. The speed on one motor is the reverse of the speed on the other. That's why you need this cheat sheet. Do one wire at a time. One connection at a time. The neutral, the high, the medium high, the medium low, the low. And of course the capacitors, those are usually the same color. But if you do them one at a time and you have a diagram, you won't have to worry about making a mistake. And if you do what I've done here and you use the existing connector, you will not modify what the schematic calls for on the furnace itself. Now you got your bad capacitor, which you notice I didn't even disconnect. Bad motor. Okay, done with that. Extra wires, done with that. Check your connections again. Make sure you didn't make a mistake. You got your diagram, or your cheat sheet rather, because that is not a diagram, it's a cheat sheet. You don't need to draw a diagram, it's too confusing, it's too easy to make mistakes with a diagram because you're going to confuse yourself half the time. Just draw a table. Just draw a table. Alright? Alright, now we'll organize the wires and put it back together. Okay, just use a couple cable ties. You see I got the P-clip there, cable tie. Okay. All right. Here's your reversing leads, which we can access if we find that we've got the motor going the wrong direction after we put it in. So, now we can slide this back up. And what we've got to do now, and this is kind of tough to do, and I won't be able to do it while I hold the camera, but we've got to hook this edge in right here and this edge right here in to the corresponding spots in there and over here. Okay, so what we'll do is slide that in, and then once that's slid in, these two tabs here, that one on the left, and that one on the right, we'll get a screw to hold it in place. All right. Here we're part of the way in there. Now we've got this hanging down. Okay, it's sitting on the bottom. But we do have the edge in place in both places. It's hard to see that one on the left. It's in both places, so let's see if I can just lift the whole thing up with my left hand here and slide it right in. There it goes right in. See, just like that. Alright. So that was pretty straightforward. The 1/4-inch sheet metal screws, or wait a minute, sorry, 5/16 sheet metal screws. My mistake. 5/16 ones go in there. And if you have a magnetic tool, holds the bit or the screw, then what you've got here, this is the tough part, is you've got that bracket there and the slotted hole, but since gravity is pulling down on the blower, it's not lining up. Okay, so you have to line it up by lifting it. So it's a two-hand job to lift it up, and that's what I'll do now. Okay, I got the one on the right end. Okay. Now I'm going to get the one on the left. You'll notice the one on the left is not lined up any better. Not lined up any better. Very difficult to see that. So with the magnetic tool, magnetic nut driver, which pretty much nobody sells that anymore, the magnetic nut driver makes it a lot easier to do what we're doing here. Another thing you can do is you can put some Mortite on the screw. That's that rope caulk. And put it on the screw and it'll hold the screw. That's a little trick I've done before. One thing that's turned out to be difficult here is getting the nut driver onto the head of this screw here straight. Because I've got this water trap in the way. As you can see, the angle of the driver is not straight, whereas over here the driver is fine. Okay, now you'll notice that I can't get to those reversing wires, so I was wrong about that. So if I have to reverse that, we'll have to take it apart to correct that, because you can't get to it. They're way back in the back there. Way back there. Yellow or orange and violet. So, alright, now we can put this, release this down. And what I'll do is I'll hook up the electrical first to make sure that my direction is correct, thereby reducing the amount of time it takes me to fix my problem if I have to pull it apart. So I'll get this control box back in position by releasing the bungee cord. There we go. That's probably not the best thing to do. Now, you might wonder why. Well, this is the fragile control unit, and it's got circuit boards in it and stuff in it that's fragile. So that's not a good thing to do, what I just did there. And then another part that's not quite as obvious. Most of these wires connected here are solid wires on this terminal strip. Okay, these solid wires are subject to breakage more easily than stranded wires. Okay, so manhandling this is not a good idea. Alright, so here you can see the hole for the edge card plug, and that's what I'm going to put in first. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to tighten these screws all the way tight. They're kind of loose. So when I plug this edge card plug in, I don't have as much of a possibility of causing a bind in the connections because somehow it's not lined up. Okay, so there, that went right in. Now I will tighten the screws. By the way, on the electrical wire nuts, do not use butt connectors. Do not use connectors intended for automotive use. The ones that you pinch for splices. And the new style, don't use those either. They're intended for solid wire anyway. The ones that they sell where you shove multiple wires into the same connector and they self-grip. Don't use those. Those are not reliable. Okay, so now down here, we'll put our black one back where it was. We'll put our white one back where it was. And maybe you can see it now. Okay. And our red one was in the middle. You got 3 positions there. Let's see, that's a good view. Maybe. So we had this position, and this position. Well, this is the one it was in. Do not mess around and get it wrong. Those positions are not for the end user to be messing with. Those positions are set up during the installation of the furnace in the home by the HVAC contractor, and you do not want to change those speeds. Those speeds are not negotiable. You can cause trouble with your heating and your air conditioning if you get those speeds wrong. The properties of the refrigeration process and the properties of the heating process are set up by the contractor. And unless you know what you're doing, sometimes if you change that, you can create a problem. So now I'm going to turn on the power switch and the fan started up. And what you do then is flip the power switch off and carefully feel what direction that fan is turning. Okay? And it is, in fact, the 50-50 chance I had, it is, in fact, turning the correct direction. Do not reach in there and grab it. You'll cut your finger. The blades are sharp. If you want to be safe, put a glove on so you know that it's going the right direction. All right? No reason to cut your finger. This little tab here that holds this bracket slides in that little tiny slot. Okay, so you kind of have to move it out like this. And get it in there. Okay. Then you got that 1/4-inch screw that goes in there. 1/4-inch hex head screw that goes right in there. Sometimes you might have to wait a while for that fan to start, but before you turn this system off, you should have set the thermostat to manual fan on and to say 80 degrees, the highest temperature, a temperature higher than the room temperature, so that when you're working on it down here and you turn it on, it will behave the way you want. So now we are ready to reassemble the final part. This one here, the drain line kind of goes past the bottom of the electrical connection here, kind of pulls on it a little bit. But of course, as most installers have done, is they do not allow for disassembly, convenient disassembly of this condensate drain. They have made it so that you have to cut it to replace, to work on this. Well, I'm not going to go with that. I'm going to force it without breaking it. And as you can see, it's not wanting to cooperate. There we go. Oh, that's difficult to do one-handed. Maybe even two-handed is difficult to do. So anyway, that's back to normal. Your condensate drain for your air conditioning. Most of them go to the drain. Some of them have a pump that sits on the floor, an electric pump. So then we're going to couple this back up. This is plastic, so you don't want to kill it. It's not high pressure, so it's not going to require incredible tightness to seal up. But you do want to come back in a day or so and check for leaks. Because if you have it in a finished basement, this will pedal on the floor and create problems with water on the floor. Okay. I didn't loosen this one before, but I'm going to check it anyway. Alright, so check your hose clamps, make sure they didn't come loose. Check, reach around behind, check to see that they didn't come loose. This one here comes up, connects to the bottom of the heat exchanger discharge right here. That shouldn't have been a problem because that was on the top side of this metal plate. So that is the end of that part, and we'll just put the cover right back on, which you should start up immediately. Oh, I got to turn the switch on this on the fusible disconnect. So that completes the replacement of the furnace blower on the Carrier Weathermaker. furnace. And leave me a comment if you have one. Happy YouTubing. Thanks for watching.